what did you take from Mike Norvell being asked about the front office, talent evaluation, part of the operation, and also the strength staff? And what did you discern from his answers?
Well, he was definitely, I thought, very emphatic about Josh Storms and the strength and conditioning staff. It seemed to me, he did want to say, we're reviewing everything, but he feels confident in that group. That does not surprise me. First of all, Josh Storms and his staff. Josh Storms has been with Norvell back, not before Memphis, back to Arizona State. I mean, they've worked together for a long, long time. They're very connected in terms of what they want to do, what they want to accomplish with their offseason programs. I think Josh Storms is very highly respected in the industry. From what I understand, I've been told this by multiple people. After last season, an NFL team wanted to hire Josh Storms. It ended up not working out, but he's very highly regarded. This is not a case where he just brought a guy from Memphis with him who he just happened to like. I mean, Josh Storms has credentials. Now you could take issue with the strength of this team. I think it's a fair point to say they don't play with strength. But I thought if you sift through the words of his answer, he basically, to me, he was saying a lot of times maybe those strength and speed don't show up on the field, but it's not that the players don't have it. I think that's the truth. I think the players have not played with conviction. I think they've not played with energy. They've not played with passion at all times. And that looks like you're not as strong as maybe you are. And I think that, so I don't think anything's going to be any major changes there. The front office, I do think there's probably going to be some changes. I think there are probably changes already taking place from what I hear in terms of that, overall recruiting and scouting department. They've had some defections over the last year, people going to other schools. This was the first group of players they brought in with that particular staff. I do think there'll be some changes there, but I think he's pretty committed to the strength and conditioning staff. Now, I'm not saying there aren't critics. There are people I've talked to, former player, family members who have not been enamored with the approach Josh Storms takes in terms of maybe the power numbers, but I don't think anything's going to change there. I think Mike Norvell feels like that's not part of the problem.
A couple of follow-ups. Number one, you had a great interview last week with Michael Alford, a one-on-one that appeared 2 articles on the site on warchant.com that you can check out right now. But, Alford alluded to conversations he wanted to have with Mike Norvell at the end of the year. Do you think that these are 2 areas that, perhaps he might be speaking on? Because the need for assistant coaches and coordinators is obvious. I don't think they're done. We've all talked about that openly, that we don't think they're done at just 3 job openings year over year. You think that maybe that is something that Michael Alford wanted to discuss with Coach Norvell?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think that, and again, I don't think, and Michael Alford made pretty clear, I thought in those interviews, that even with these decisions, he didn't tell Mike Norvell, you've got to fire these guys. I mean, they worked hand in hand. And so it may be a situation where he'll come say, Coach, I watched this play. I didn't feel like we were strong as some of the teams we were playing against. What are we going to do about that? Or, what are we going to do about some of these evaluations? And then he's going to want to hear what Mike Norvell says his plan is going to be. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if both of those topics come up. But again, ultimately, ADs generally don't get into hiring and firing too much on coaches' staffs because it's not really their expertise, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Do you think if Mike, this is the second follow-up, if Mike was in a judgment-free zone, which is very hard as a head coach, but how you're with your friends, like, it's okay, speak your mind. You think he would roll the players a little bit more if he could, and he would be forgiven for it? Like, I need them to care. Do you think he would go someplace like that? Because it does sound, you're right, it does sound at times like he's hinting at that, but he knows he can't say that because it's his job at the end of the day.
He kind of hinted at it today. I mean, I think I forgot what I had asked him. I asked him something about I can't remember what I asked him, but he talked about the players knowing they're accountable too. I was asked him about the relationship with the offensive linemen, how, the older offensive linemen, particularly Maurice Smith, Robert Scott, Darius Washington, those guys who have been here for the whole time Alex Atkins was here, they're older guys, so you think they'd be able to handle it, but Alex Atkins has been their guy for 5 years, 6 years, whatever it is. And so how are they handling it? And one of the first things he said was, they're handling it well. And players also are understanding that they're accountable for this. It was almost like he was saying, listen, guys, if you guys don't play hard and if you don't do everything, your coaches are going to get fired. Like, this is a business. And so, yeah, man, I at the end of the day, I'm sure he feels like that to some degree, but at the end of the day, also, we all know that he brought these players here,
Yep.
he evaluated these players, and his staff coaches these players. So if they're not performing, that's ultimately on him, and it's a reflection on him. That's on his report card, and he's got to fix it. And that's why I do think, but I think, man, I think you're going to see the roster, along with this coaching staff, more changes to come. I think you're going to see a ton of changes on this roster. And I think kids are going to have to show over these next 2 weeks whether or not they need to be on this team next season if they want to be.
It just goes back to that Monday presser from a while ago. It was such a red flag in retrospect, where Mike Norvell was saying, I've asked these guys, what are you doing away from the time that you're here at practice to invest in getting better? Like now, that just, with the context of 1-9, you're like, man, he just did not like what they weren't doing their homework, or at least what he thought their homework should be. And that tells you by omission too, Ira, that he didn't have to worry about a Jared Verse, a Braden Fisk, a Jordan Travis, a Jaheim Bell, or Keon Coleman to come prepared to do because they were doing the extra things outside of the mandatory responsibilities of the football team. It just, in retrospect, it makes so much sense. Go ahead.
And we'll get to more questions, but I want to touch on that. And I know the conversation you and Jeff were having today on the extra show you guys did today, that people can go watch on YouTube. I think this is a unique situation because you guys were talking a lot about how this team clearly has not responded to, that you don't see them playing with the same passion for most of the season that you see on some other teams that with not great records. I think when you look back at the whole picture of this season, I think you see a team that lost a lot of leaders. They had some veterans that I think the coaching staff thought would be leaders that have not been leaders. And then you have a team way underperformed expectations that even the coaching staff had. So now you've got everybody just kind of lost. I think in the program, lost. I don't know that that's the same. I wouldn't go so far as to say that they don't want to play for Mike Norvell or they don't want to play for the staff. I just think that they have been shell-shocked since, if not in Dublin, certainly after BC and Memphis. Like, I think they've questioned everything, and man, that is not the way to play football. You cannot play this sport with doubts, self-doubts, doubts about your coaches. And so that has to be rectified. And, it's a combination of things that led to that. But to me, that's as big a thing as they got to fix.
Going back to Dublin, and just that was more on the defense to me that day, where it didn't look like it knew what was coming. And it's like, man, Georgia Tech didn't do anything crazy. There were no tendency breakers. Like, how are you not prepared for this element or that element? You knew all offseason that this is what Tech was going to do, which leads me to believe that they thought just by getting on the plane, they were going to win that football game.
And it goes back to what we were just saying. Like, you had so many guys on this team that were players on that defense in the past, but not stars. Like, they weren't the reason that defense was good. A lot of these guys on this defense played last season. They lost, I think, 6-7 starters. And I was talking to somebody on the staff recently that I was totally wrong. Like, I thought that because they had some guys with better measurables that they were now bringing in, I thought maybe the defense could be as good or better this year. And man, could we not have been more wrong?
Yep.
But I think you had a combination of some of those new players were not as good as they thought they were going to be. And then some of those returning players, I think, felt like they were part of that defense that was so good. And it's just going to, like you said, just roll the ball out there. And that's who we are. But it's like, no, man, you guys weren't the dudes on that defense. Braden Fish, Jared Verse, Renardo Green, Tatum Bethune. Those were the dudes on that defense. And Jarian Jones and on and on. And this group, it seems like, kind of just rode, thinking that it was just going to continue just because they're still here.